Do you believe that there is absolutely nothing when you die, just maybe an inky blackness, and your consciousness is gone for all time? My name is Heather Feather. I am the owner of Rare Bird Medicine, and today's topic is the nothing. Ooh, spooky. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Never-Ending Story. It was one of my all-time favorites as a child. I had like a stack, like The Dark Crystal, Secret of NIMH, Never-Ending Story. I've watched those films so many times because I love them so much. But in that film, there's something called the nothing intruding, and there's a construct of everything being whittled down to just a drop of sand. And there's a prophecy, I believe a Peruvian or Shipibo prophecy as well, that there's a great eagle that will become very sick. And it will get so sick, it will start to attack the condor, and it'll burn the condor down to just an ember, kind of like the Never-Ending Story. And once that condor becomes like an ember, it will rise like a phoenix, and it will come and heal the sick eagle. This prophecy is about, obviously, North America, keeper of the eagle, and condor, South America. The eagle being this people in the States becoming diseased in the body, having unhealthy physical states, having mental health issues, which seem rampant in our culture presently. And then South Americans are often offering plant medicines to integrate consciousness and help with some of the mental illness and conditions that are present here in North America. Some shamans even believe that the shamans of the future will come from the West or from North America. And I think that will occur through some of this integration work that will occur from consciousness that has become very divisive and separatist and steeped in illusions, one could say. But what do you think happens when you die? What is your philosophy on death? Heather Feather has lost about 70 people, so it's a question I spend a lot of time thinking about. The musician atmosphere says some type of line around, I don't think any of you think about death. I think all of you think about sex, not even as near as much as I think of death. And I relate to that. Like, I think of death all the time because it's been one of my greatest teachers. My father drowned in the Brazos River when I was 17 months old. My mom died when I was 24 in a car accident. I have lost multiple lovers. I've had lots of people I've lost to suicide. I've lost coworkers. I have lost grandparents, family members, cousins. I have lost around 70 people-ish, which is not the most any humans ever lost, but it's enough to have been standing at the grave to really question this thing. And there's no place I've studied it more deeply than when my mother died in a car accident when I was 24. I wanted to prove to myself that she still existed. So like a scientist, I went to the library and would just stack books up and read endlessly. All the books I could get my hands on around near-death experiences, around reincarnation, around anything that meant that consciousness existed beyond what we call the grave. Now, it's interesting because near-death experiences are actually death experiences based on science. If you follow science, science says that there's a point at which you're dead, flatlined on the table, no brain activity, dead. And there are people that have written books on near-death experiences or death experiences where they died and were flatlined, dead on the table for 90 minutes. And then their corpse was reanimated with their consciousness, which does imply that consciousness is at least able to exist outside of death for 90 minutes. We do have proof of that. We have evidence of it. Hospitals have witnessed all kinds of miraculous experiences if one wants to start to consider what occurs at the moment of death. So near-death experiences are one facet of that there have been tons of vetted things and burden of proof scientific evidence around that topic. You can watch Surviving Death on Netflix, which is an amazing show of a woman who worked in the neuroscience field or in hospitals and kind of had a more scientific atheistic belief like many of the people in her field. And then she died for quite some time and miraculously had this experience of consciousness beyond the grave. But the other thing I studied was a lot of reincarnation. And so for decades of my life, I had a hard time believing that nothing could occur simply because of the burden of proof I studied around near-death experiences and around reincarnation in my 20s. All kinds of kids can tell stories that get vetted of like being able to describe the name of a person that died, the platoon they served in during World War II, the type of plane that they flew, where the buttons were, the outfits that they were issued, the color of them. And then they go to the historical records, and everything that this child under the age of 5 is saying is exact, and drawing is exactly what occurred. A man by that name died in that troop with that, So when you start to study the burden of proof, there's a tremendous amount of it. If the topic of consciousness beyond the grave interests you at all, I do think it's important that each of us really consider what it is we've chosen to believe. Many two-leggeds in the culture I grew up in believe that when you die, if you are a good person, you'll go to a God that is loving. If you are a bad person, you will go to hell and be tormented by a fallen angel for all time. I mean, fallen angel's kind of a strange thing. I can fall down and get back up, and I do fall down a bunch. I'm not the most graceful being all the time. And I get back up. And I've had that happen spiritually for me as well. And no matter how many times I get knocked down, I'm going to stand up every time. But an angel can rise and fly in addition to getting up. And I mean that in all levels of existence. The idea that God would create an angel that it would know would fall and would then torment souls for all time, which is super sadistic, we could agree. But then the all-powerful God does nothing about it. That God, to me, is sadistic. It doesn't make sense. Like, I don't experience myself having that level of sadism. So if I'm going to believe in an intelligence that put the Fibonacci sequence and sacred geometry, which are beautiful things back of the design, caused a sea otter to have a pocket to put their favorite rock in, or have a male seahorse carry the baby, or have a goat have a rectangular iris unlike mine, or any of these things that are anomalies that I didn't put in the design, I don't see sadism. I see beauty. I see profundity. I see something that I take a knee to that is very intelligent. I didn't put the oak tree in the oak seed. I didn't cause these things to exist. There is a tongue back of the universe that science uses to prove its point, and that tongue is called mathematics. And scientists didn't put it there, and humans didn't put it there. The mathematics of the universe, pi, the Fibonacci sequence, all of these things existed well before you and I. But there's another thing that's occurring when we consider math that we use for science, and that also, to Heather, implies intelligence of a creative designer back of the design that is not me. We live in a waking world that is filled to the brim with things. It's made of atoms. Atoms are made out of 99.99999999996% emptiness if we round up. Are we certain that we're here? And that emptiness, or those atoms, or those particles, or those rocks, are having a space-time location because consciousness or a mind is collapsing waves of probability into the particles of our timeline, as Thomas Young taught us in 1801, and Wolfgang Ketterl proved with the quantum essentials recently at MIT. So our minds are causing particles to create our world, and that world includes two visual reference points. The first one is a waking world that is filled to the brim with all kinds of things that are made of emptiness. That sounds very miraculous, magical, and mystical, almost like we have a loving God or an intelligence back of the design that's much smarter than us. We also have a dreaming world when we go to sleep that is filled to the brim with all types of consciousness, movements, interaction. Mathematically, Heather Feather finds it illogical to imagine that we live in a conscious, waking world filled to the brim, even though it's made of emptiness, mystical, and we live in a dreaming world also full of emptiness. I'm going all these places while I'm asleep, but it's filled to the brim with things, and that math adds up to when I'm dead, there's just nothing. Where does that nothing exist? Does it have a space-time location? Is it a black hole? Do you go into a black hole? Is it a singularity of existence that suddenly you're experiencing, even though you've experienced these two reference points? You're made of atoms which cannot be created nor destroyed, so your actual physicality is eternal. We already have that play in the field. But then where exactly would this nothing be? Is it a singularity? You mean like a God? So you die and then you go back from all this divisive seeming separation that is illusory because really emptiness is present and it is singular, into another form of singularity, like a divine consciousness that maybe put the tongue of math back of the design. For me, in order to believe something, it has to make sense. It doesn't make sense to me to have an all-powerful, all-wise, Gnostic, knowing, loving creator that does nothing about a devil. That's completely illogical. I don't believe in demons, devils. If they existed, they don't even get a drop of my consciousness because I'm so devoted to the divine light of love and the gnosis of the truth of love. For me, that's for me, teach their own. You know what I mean? That doesn't warrant my attention because my God did not make a mistake. But I do question myself often on what I've chosen to be my philosophy of the grave, because we do know, just like you and I and everyone else you'll ever know in the paradigm, death coming like a freight train. You can be certain that you're going to die. What have you chosen to believe? It's really important to consider this thing, and you may even want to consider scientifically exploring the philosophy you've chosen to hold. You can always subscribe to Rare Bird Medicine on YouTube. I'm Moon.